Hi, I'm Manuela. I'm a program manager on the Parks Customer Advisory team, and I'm here today with Jennifer again.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Monroe, and I am president of Alchemy Automation.
In this video, we'll be talking about how the CoE Starter Kit automates the process of dealing with inactive and unused applications and flows that may no longer be needed.
A frequent question that we get is how do we deal with objects that are no longer useful?
That's right. Unused apps and flows can lead to a very cluttered environment and may make maintenance and management of Power Platform adoption very difficult and can also lead to capacity issues.
So, first of all, how important is this set of processes?
So we've seen tenants that have thousands or even multiple thousands of apps and flows in their tenant that were no longer serving any business value. They were just kept around, and it really reduced the usability for the end user because they were looking at a very cluttered environment and could no longer find the app that they were trying to launch.
Yeah, and it also leads to problems for the admin because you lose your agility when you have a bunch of objects that aren't useful for doing things like DLP changes or other strategic changes that you're trying to make into your tenant.
And without automation, the burden on the admin to discover these apps and flows manually is very high. It can lead to kind of a back and forth between admins and makers. And if decisions aren't recorded properly, you may ask the same question again in 6 months' time. So a manual process can lead to a lot of frustration, both on the admin side as well as on the maker side.
So the starter kit has implemented its processes to put the burden of cleaning up objects on the makers of those objects themselves instead of on the admin.
So the workflow sends approval tasks to the maker, and they can approve for their application or their flow to be deleted from the environment if it's no longer needed, or they can ask to keep it. In the email that the maker gets, we ask them if they're still using the app or flow. We tell them why we think they aren't, and provide information on why cleaning up old objects is beneficial to them, their end users, and the tenant overall.
So what happens if I have an app that's not used very frequently, but is really important? Let's say an annual review app that's only used once a year.
So as a maker, I can provide business justification on why that application needs to be kept around, even if it looks unused. And the admin reviews that justification and can then exempt that application from the process.
And how about if I have a bunch? If I have many apps and flows that are no longer used, do I have to go and deal with all of this in email?
No, there is a Canvas application that a maker can use to go through all of their inactive objects and make decisions right there and then. But this does require the maker to have a premium license because the application uses Dataverse in the background.
Putting the onus on the makers is great, but what happens when the maker actually isn't responsive and doesn't respond and do the work that we're asking them to do?
Yeah, great question. Then a monthly summary is sent to the manager of the maker or the makers, and they get information about all of the pending decisions. So they get information about their makers not being responsive.
And so, what is the role of the admin in all of these processes?
So they can exempt entire environments from the process, and they also review the business justifications provided by makers when they ask for exemptions of their apps and flows, and that's really it. So they don't have to manually look after what's inactive or reach out to the makers. They purely approve any exemptions to that process.
So, to summarize the people involved in these processes, there's the makers of the objects themselves, who will be in charge of making the decision about what happens with their objects, the managers of those makers, who will be notified if the makers don't respond and react to the requests for cleanup, and then the admins, who will be charged with approving exemptions to the processes.
So there's actually very little effort on the admin side to keep an uncluttered tenant and make sure that inactive objects are dealt with.
Great news.
Right, so from a maker point of view, this is the email I would receive. It's an approvers email where I get information about the application that is unused. In this case, it's called the Crisis Communication Admin Application. It was last modified about 2 years ago. We don't even know when it was last launched. And I get further information about what it means to approve or reject that from that email. So if I approve it, the app will be deleted from the tenant. If I select reject, I should maybe launch the application again or republish it in order to avoid receiving the same email again. So in this case, I can approve the deletion, and that means that app will be deleted from the tenant in 3 weeks, and so I still have time to archive a copy for myself, or take a backup there.
Continuing with the point of view of the maker, they can come in and look at their objects all up. So I'm in here as Adele Vance, and I can see all of the apps that have been requested to do the approval. And I can go through and I can do the approval or reject right here in line. And I can ask for an exemption. And that will be sent then in there so that the admin persona can go and review my notes and see if I can get an exemption. This same app, if I am coming in as a manager, can be looked at to see the work from my employees. So now, instead of being my apps and flows that I'm looking at as Adele, I'm going to go in and see what have my people been ignoring. And so I can come through and I can see Lynn's done a pretty good job of keeping her apps up to date, but she's got some flows that she's been ignoring for a while. And I can come in and remind her to go and look at this, or I can reject the deletion if I happen to know what it is used for. These then will show up for the admin. So now let's go and look at the admin persona. So the admin can come into this app, the App and Flow Inactivity Notifications Cleanup app, and they can see, I know it's quite well named.
Rolls off the tongue.
And they can come in and look at all of the different classifications. So let's look at the flows that have been rejected from deletion but not yet excused. And here's this one that I just did for Lynn, and they can come in and review my notes, see actually this is important for, and I pretending that I had put better notes there, and I can say, yes, let's go ahead and mark this flow as excused. And now Lynn will no longer be notified for that particular flow. And then alternatively, if there was a miscommunication or something like that, if they said, oh, I approved, let's see if I approved this one for deletion, but I did not mean to, then you can delete the approval and then it will be put back into the system. So those are the apps at play.
That's great. So both makers, managers, and admins have an easy way to record the approval of the deletion, reject the deletion, and provide a business justification and provide details for that.
Correct. Yeah.
So let's quickly recap the process. So on a weekly basis, a flow runs to see if an app has been launched or modified in the past 6 months, or if it's excused from the process already. If any of those are true, it does nothing. The process ends there. Otherwise, we guess that the application is no longer useful.
And then once we've identified something as not being useful, we look to see if there's already an approval to delete it in place. If there is, and if the app still exists, we send them a reminder to do a backup. After 3 weeks, that we'll just delete that application, and there will be no more notifications sent about it.
And if no approval is on file, we look to see if a rejection to delete is already on file. So if the maker has rejected the application to delete it, if they want to keep it. If that is already on file, we ignore the application. And if not, then we create an approval, which sends the email that we've showed during the demo.
And those rejects only stay in the system for 1 month. So you, the admin, will have 1 month to look at those notes and exempt the thing. And if that doesn't happen, then the rejection gets deleted and it goes back to the beginning of the process. The process for flows is the same as the process for apps, but the criteria are a little bit different.
So currently the CoE Starter Kit can't gather information about flow runs. So we don't know if a flow has been run in the past 6 months. But even if we could, we do not believe that these would indicate that a flow is useful and still needed.
Yeah, and this is because flows have triggers that aren't based on human action. So you might have a flow that's running and consuming a lot of resources, but no longer actually providing any business value, and no one even knows that that's happening.
Yeah, so we don't actually look for flow runs to trigger this process. We just look to see if it's been edited, so if someone has made changes to that flow, or if it's already excused from the process.
And then everything else is the same besides this criteria difference. So just like the other areas of the kit, we want to help you make the processes yours. We're the starter kit. So next we'll talk about the configuration options you have. So similar to compliance and some other areas, we allow you to exempt entire environments from the process. So again, sometimes we've seen people do this with default environment because they want things to be a playground. And we've also seen people do this with production environments. Quite often, people will do this for their CoE Starter Kit environment as a very easy example to show you an area to use this feature.
Admins can also configure thresholds of what inactive means for their tenant. The default is set to 6 months, but you can change that to make it longer or shorter based on your requirements. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of how the CoE Starter Kit automates the process of dealing with inactive objects. To learn more about the process, please check out our documentation. And if you want to stay up to date with the CoE Starter Kit videos that we're recording, please subscribe to the Pablet from YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you.